If you watched our older videos on India's parliamentary sessions, you've probably heard us say this before. Parliament's time is taxpayers' money. And if you've seen how disruptive the parliament can get, you would know why we keep saying it. When run down local bodies aren't discussed, corruption at all scales does not feature, paper leaks are protested on outside but not discussed within the halls, reigns create havoc and challenge all systems in place, parliamentary sessions remain busy with political rhetoric amidst it all, while tax money keeps the show running, if at all. Be that as it may, today we want to talk about a specific aspect of the parliament this time. Stay with us for this one, what does a functional parliamentary session lead to? The issues we just listed above seem to feature a sign of a not so functional parliament. So it's time to find out why or why not. To answer this, we will need to break down the parliamentary sessions into questions such as what goes into running these parliamentary sessions? How do different parties, government and the opposition, participate in the parliamentary sessions? Can the parliament function without the participation of both the government and the opposition? In order to assess Parliament's functionality, in order to understand when actual issues can come to the parliamentary forefront, we need to understand the sum of its parts. So when you check out our Parliamentary Toolkit or watch the parliamentary sessions on Sun TV, you yourself can analyze its functioning and hopefully sift through the political rhetoric. You can actually hold each MP, each party, each functionary responsible not to outrage, but to vehemently demand accountability and work. Hit subscribe if this is the kind of content you like, and let's get right to it. Before we understand a parliamentary sitting, let's quickly set the basics. 1. We have two houses of parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. 2. There's an important article that empowers the President of India to summon the houses of the Parliament. Article 85. While this article does not mandate 3 sessions explicitly, it does mandate that 6 months shall not intervene between the last sitting of one session and the first sitting of the next. Effectively, this mandates that the Parliament must meet at least twice a year. Moreover, the President can summon the House on the aid and advice of the Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. And third, when it comes to the durations of these sessions, it's worth noting that there is no legal minimum for the number of sitting days in India. If you are wondering what a sitting means, it's when the members of a House assemble under the Speaker or Chairman to conduct the business scheduled for that day during a session. A sitting of the House ordinarily takes place between 11 am and 6 pm. Important here to note that the number of parliamentary sittings have reduced over the decades. The Parliament sat for an average number of 120 days annually in the Lok Sabha during independent India's first 2 decades, which has now dropped to an average of 70 days annually. Which is exactly why it matters even more for the Parliament to function well, especially when it already has fewer days to get its business done. Now that we're clear on the broad basics, let's break down what goes into running a parliamentary session and the roles played by the government and the opposition. Understanding how each side participates will give us a clearer picture of the Parliament's functioning, and it will help us assess parliamentary sessions as critical voters and citizens. Meet the Business Advisory Committee. Before a parliamentary session's sitting start, one committee decides what the Parliament will actually do with its time. The Business Advisory Committee. This committee members are nominated by the Speaker and have representatives from all major parties in the House. The BSC, once constituted, assumes office in June every year. It meets before the start of every session and as and when required thereafter. Finally, members from the opposition parties who do not find representation on the committee are chosen and invited by the Speaker as special invitees, including leaders of parties with 5 or more MPs in the House. thereby allowing all sections of the House to be represented on the BAC. Why is this important? Well, no sitting takes place at the whims and the fancy of the party in power, that is, the ruling government. It requires agreement and cooperation of other MP members on the BAC, since this committee is responsible for the list of business. This list is the official daily agenda outlining government business, questions and private members' bills. It decides the number of hours allocated to specific bills and discussions. Basically, what a day in the parliament would look like when in session. So with this, we can say with confidence that no party on either side of the house would be ever blindsided by the list of business or have reasons to come unprepared for the discussions that would ensue. Furthermore, all members in the committee need to participate in the BAC meetings that take place before each sitting or nominate someone in the case of absence, after informing the speaker, that is. Since the meetings take place so frequently, the list of business is constantly revised and issued to all of its respective House MPs 2 days before the sitting. Therefore, the agenda of the parliament boils down to how well the opposition utilizes this committee to push for certain debates and discussions, and how the government leverages this committee to ensure its own business agenda does not get sidetracked. A notable example which demonstrates the role of the opposition in pushing the BAC to add a debate to its list is the SIR debate of the winter session of 2025. Though it followed after loss of many days of sittings due to adjournments following protests and disruptions in the House. Do note here that the final sign-off on the BAC agenda for the sittings comes from the Speaker. With this, we have covered step 1, setting the agenda, also known as the list of business. We will now get into the segments of a parliamentary sitting. A sitting can be broadly divided into 4 segments: question hour, 0 hour, papers laid on the table, and legislative business. All these 4 segments will be explained over the next few minutes to help you understand where the government and the opposition comes into place and what a well-functioning parliament requires from each stakeholder. Question hour. So, parliamentary sitting in the Lok Sabha begins with the question hour from 11 am to 12 pm. In the case of the Rajya Sabha, the question hour begins at 12 pm after the 0 hour. Let's understand the question hour. As the very name suggests, the question hour is for questioning the ruling government. This is where MPs belonging to any party, including the ruling party, can ask questions to the Council of Ministers about administrative functioning and government policies. Since the questions are abundant, ministries are divided into 5 groups with fixed days allocated to each group in order to simplify the process of answering MPs' inquiries. Whether the questions are oral, starred, unstarred, or short notice, the notice period of these questions ranges between 10 to 15 days or less. They are selected by a ballot process, barring short notice questions, which are chosen with Speaker's consent. The ministry in question is obligated to respond to these questions in written or oral format, depending on the type of question, which are then recorded and archived. Therefore, the question hour is unquestionably powerful. It's a tool for all MPs, irrespective of their party. Yet, data shows that in recent sessions, the question hour is often the first casualty when the parliament is disrupted. Here's how we found that data. In the last few months, Namaste Democracy was building the Parliamentary Toolkit, a citizen-friendly platform for you to track the performance of the parliament. When we went through the archives of the sessions under the 18th Lok Sabha, we found out that the number of question hours lost are glaring as presented in this table. The monsoon session of 2025 was the worst affected so far, when 19 sittings lost their question hours, accounting to a loss of over 15 hours. For how we calculated days lost or more data on the parliamentary sessions, head to our website and check the link below. Coming back to the data so far, the 18th Lok Sabha sessions show us that the very tool designed to hold the government accountable has been getting lost due to disruptions. Sadly, this isn't a new tactic, it's just becoming worse. The 15th Lok Sabha of the UPA-2 regime of 2009-2014, for example, was one of the worst performing Lok Sabhas due to relentless disruptions. over 60% of the time for question hour was lost to disruptions. So why did we go into the question hours data? To find out how many hours the question hour gets disrupted, which basically means hours lost to ask government questions they are bound by rule to answer. To understand who really is at loss when we use the question hour. Not the government, clearly, because they go scot-free, but rather all the MPs hoping to demand accountability from respective ministries, which in turn is a loss to the constituencies these MPs represent or are rather meant to. However, MPs still have other ways to make themselves heard. Let's get into the second segment of the parliamentary sitting. The hour starts at 12 pm in the Lok Sabha and 11 am in the Rajya Sabha. The segment which seems to be a casualty of disruptions, just like the question hour. Zero hour. Zero hour is an informal practice not mentioned in the rules of procedure of the parliament, and it gets its nickname zero hour since it takes place at midday. The zero hour allows any MP to raise urgent matters of public importance, issues that simply cannot wait for regular order of business. This includes emergencies, national security, law and order, economic and essential commodity issues, and even constituencies or local grievances. This is one such space for our elected representatives to effectively represent us by raising pertinent and urgent current issues. For example, if the parliament was functioning as it needs to, this could be the segment utilized for, say, when a paper is leaked, or when a young child loses a life to a pothole, or when monsoon floods all the roads. But here's the thing, zero hour isn't a free-for-all. To raise a matter, an MP must first submit a written notice to the speaker or the chair before 10 am. Then the speaker has to admit it, and the concerned ministry needs to be prepared with a response on the spot or at a later date on the record. In other words, it demands homework from the MP raising the issue, from the government being questioned, and from the chair deciding what makes the cut. Therefore, only 20 matters are typically admitted per day and are selected on a priority basis. Thus, preparation by both the MP and the minister is what gives the zero hour its weight. And just like question hour, everything said during zero hour goes on official government records. And having said that, we have now covered two key parliamentary tools that are available for MPs to keep the government in check and exert their own parliamentary strength. What's next after zero hour? Lunch. Well, yes. But then starts the second half of a parliamentary sitting where a piece of paper can, in fact, impact your future. Papers laid on the table. Papers laid on the table refers to a fundamental parliamentary procedure where the government is accountable to the legislature. Through this process, union ministers present vital official documents such as annual reports, audit findings by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, rules, regulations, and statutory ordinances before the House. Though this segment of the Parliament is primarily run by the government, the role of all MPs come into play. They participate in Parliament committees, namely the Committee on Papers Laid on the Table, formed in both houses, and they review these papers to verify procedural compliance, check for delays, and ensure both English and Hindi versions are provided. But papers are not the only thing that make their way to the floor of the House in the second half. This is also when the Parliament gets down to its next and probably most awaited segment, lawmaking, that is legislative business. Legislative business, understood as lawmaking, is a collaborative process that involves all hands on deck, both the government and the opposition. Though bills can often seem like dry technical documents discussed in a far-off building, they are actually the primary tool used to change our reality once they become a law. But how does a bill become a law? Let's quickly understand this to get an idea of what role the government and the opposition plays in the process. In the Indian parliamentary system, a bill, be it an ordinary bill or a constitutional amendment bill, it must undergo 3 rigorous readings in both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. This involves introduction, clause-by-clause scrutiny, and a final vote. While ordinary bills require simple majority, that is more than 50% of member votes, constitutional amendment bills require more attention. These bills demand a special majority, that is 50% of the total membership of the House and 2/3 of the members' votes to pass the bill. The journey concludes at the President's desk. Ordinary bills can be returned for reconsideration, but the President must grant assent to constitutional amendment bills. Therefore, the strength of the government and the opposition is crucial here, not just to vote or pass these bills, but to be proactive in the very readings that take place before the bill is put to vote. This means better debates, better scrutiny, and therefore more legislation. We can, of course, find more excitement, differing thoughts, and better debates in this segment when there is balance in numbers between the two sides of the House. But if a party in power is holding a higher majority, say as it was during the 17th Lok Sabha, then lawmaking becomes easier from the government perspective and hasten from the opposition's perspective. So we can say numbers in the houses play a vital role in how successful and thorough the legislative business segment ends up being. However, when the parliament is disrupted and the time meant for legislative business turns into hangama, it can mean no actual lawmaking, rushed bills, pending bills or lapsed bills. Say a bill is pending in the Lok Sabha or passed in the Lok Sabha but pending in the Rajya Sabha or vice versa, it will lapse if no action is taken on it before the parliament term dissolves. The 15th Lok Sabha, the most disruptive, had the maximum amount of pending bills. Upon its resolution in 2014, as many as 68 bills lapsed in the lower house. On the other side comes the question of time spent on debates. 179 bills were passed during the 15th Lok Sabha, but does quantity amount to quality? If you take a hard look at the table on your screens, you'd be surprised to find the number of important bills passed with a discussion time less than 10 minutes in both the houses. The National Green Tribunal Bill was only introduced in 2009 and it was discussed for less than 5 minutes in both houses. This was the very bill responsible for setting up specialized environmental courts in the country. Similarly, protection of women from sexual harassment at workplace, just 19 seconds in the Lok Sabha and under 2-hour debates in the Rajya Sabha, though it had initial drafts from 2005 and 2007. While few of the bills in this table have a long-standing history of being introduced and discussed in previous Lok Sabhas, it still presents a glaring picture of not just the time spent on discussion but also the MP participation corresponding to it, especially considering the fact that every Lok Sabha term is not comprised of the same 543 MPs. They, after all, do tend to change enough to deem the requirement for proper debates. The numbers continue to tell an uncomfortable truth about how laws are being made in India even today. In the 17th Lok Sabha, 35% of bills were passed with less than an hour discussion in the Lok Sabha. And remember, this is the same Lok Sabha where the current party was in power with a much higher majority. The corresponding figure for the Rajya Sabha was 34%. And if recent examples of the 18th Lok Sabha are to be considered, then the Shanti Bill and the VBG Ramji Bill were passed during opposition walkouts. These examples of time spent on debating are just instances where bills see lopsided participation by the opposing voices who are missing in action, out of choice, and the ruling government not pushing for participation by all, convenient for them if nothing else. We'd like to remind you here that the current government already has the numbers required to pass bills, that is 50% or more of the MPs. So technically, they don't need the opposition to pass ordinary bills into laws. Constitutional laws, thankfully, are much tougher. In summation, the key point we wish to reiterate here is that debate matters because MPs examine clauses, question ministers, propose amendments, and create a public record of the entirety of the discourse. When the opposition walks out or sessions witness disruptive proceedings, it actually shortens debate, reduces scrutiny, and allows bills to pass with minimal resistance. In other words, the government's job becomes easier. When MPs leave the floor, the government wins twice, once with vote and once without the scrutiny. Now let's circle back to where we started. What happens when the parliament functions as it ideally should? What does a functional parliamentary session lead to? When both the government and the opposition fulfill their roles as discussed broadly over the course of each sitting, overall the parliamentary session moves beyond shouting matches and results in tangible, high-quality outcomes that affect everything from the economy, social cohesion, national security, international standing, and everything in between. Questions, discussions, debates, and legislations all take place, bringing efficiency and accountability to the forefront over headless political rhetoric and fist-fighting with words. Furthermore, a well-functioning parliament actually sets a good precedent for new MPs and helps them learn how to work in a parliament, a culture that carries on term after term, thereby preparing a stronger parliament, which in turn will only create a stronger democracy. Ideally, beyond these four segments in a parliamentary sitting of the parliamentary sessions, government and opposition's parliamentary work happens all year round beyond sessions through parliamentary committees, the parliament scrutiny engine. This is where smaller groups consisting of MPs across different political parties come to study and deliberate on a range of subject matters, bills, and budgets of all the ministries. A recent example of this is the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs, chaired by the Congress MP Shashi Tharoor. The 13-member multi-party delegation completed a 4-day study visit to Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh to review strategic border security, Indo-Pak and Sino-Indian relations, and passport services in June 2026. Studies like this thus translate into detailed reports that will be presented on the floor of the House. Yet here's the irony: as per 2025 Lok Sabha data, 40% of MPs skipped key parliamentary committee meetings. That's a platform meant for real deliberation, and strength in numbers seems to be going largely unused. The bottom line: a well-run parliamentary session benefits both the government and the opposition, that is, a country as a whole. Your MP's performance in parliament is directly tied to your parliamentary constituency. Did they raise the issue of pollution well enough? Were they questioned on the funds allocated to their constituency? Did they raise the requirement for a metro, rail track? If they were busy staging a walkout or remained inactive, the answer is no. The cost of disruption is borne not by those who legislate, but by those who must live under the legislated constituencies, which is us, the citizens. But it's not all opposition-led loss for us. It is important to remember that the absence of a functional opposition doesn't create a crisis for the government. It creates convenience, but over decades, also complacency within the government, which means, again, the complacency comes at the cost of the citizens. Every walkout and every session abandoned is a session the government didn't have to defend thoroughly. That is not protest. That, dear viewers, is concession. So be clear, all sides hold equal responsibility, as do we. Read the data, follow the debates, reach out to your MPs, and participate in the functionality of the parliament. Thank you for watching.